Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about something so important today, and that is the power of play. So, play is one of, if not maybe the most important thing that we have to lean into when we're talking about finding our style, being surprised by our art, even creating fine art. Play is so important. In fact, Einstein used to say that play was the key to innovation and creativity. It's super, super important. But somehow we kind of lost that along the way. You know, when we were kids and we're on the playground, we're playing Red Rover, or maybe we were playing school, or hide and seek. Like, play was an essential part of our lives. And then adulting, right? We had to adult. But when we show up to the canvas, we've got to reinvigorate ourselves. So how do we translate play into our creative practice when we show up at the canvas? That is what this week's podcast is all about. I'm going to tell you all of the things that I do and give you some concrete tools for you to incorporate play back into yours. All right, are you ready? Let's get messy. So let's first define, what does play mean? All right. So for this part, I'm just going to read this definition because I think it's probably more powerful than what I could come up with on my own. So here it is. Ready? Play is a voluntary, intrinsically motivated activity, typically associated with enjoyment and pleasure. Having said that, why do we avoid it? It can involve physical, mental, or social interactions, and is often characterized by spontaneity, creativity, and freedom from formal rules and structure. Okay. Now, having heard that, who doesn't want to incorporate more play into their lives? And the reason this is important is because, the saying, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So hopefully by the end of this episode, you're going to see, yeah, these are like specific tools that you can use for your creative practice, but maybe you're going to want to incorporate more play into your everyday lives, because that is going to actually inform your creative practice. And it reminds me, just recently, I had some friends that were coming into Austin, and I was picking them up at the airport, and they were a little nervous about coming because they were actually coming because my friend's son needed to have some surgery, and they were apprehensive about it. And so just like when I show up to the canvas and I think, okay, how can I make this fun? How can I make this play spontaneous? How can I make this feel more free? How can I make this feel like an adventure? I decided that to pick them up from the airport, I was going to dress myself in, one of those wind socks that you see out in front of car dealerships, right? The kind that they blow up and they fall down and everything. So I ordered a $40 windsock costume, blow up costume from Amazon. And I created the entire scenario. I parked and I waddled over across, the parking lot area. I got all of the crazy looks and stares, and I made so many people laugh. And then when I saw them, their fear and trepidation, was instantly filled with laughter and silliness, and they're like, they couldn't believe it. And so it was a way of taking an ordinary experience. How many of you have picked up people from the airport? It was a way of taking an ordinary experience and going, okay, how can I make this more fun? So that's the whole idea, right? That's the whole idea of what we're going for when we show up to the canvas. So how does that translate, though, into our art? So the first thing that I like to think of is, how can I lean into my curiosity rather than self-editing that curiosity? So the way this can show up, and maybe you can relate to this, I love looking at art. And if you're an artist, you probably love looking at art too. But sometimes what can happen is that we can really enjoy some of the styles and the mark makings and maybe even paint colors or whatever. We can really enjoy that in other artists' work. And then when we show up to create our own work, and then we're like, oh, I want to grab this marker, I want to grab this pastel, or maybe I want to grab this paint. Instead of following that line of curiosity and just staying with that, we can often go, oh wait, no, I didn't see that in so and so's work that I loved. Or for me, and this just recently happened, it's like, oh wait, I didn't do that in the last painting that I did that I loved so much, right? So I stopped my sense of play and curiosity by self editing this. But the thing is like when I lean into the curiosity, let me just tell you about this painting. So I created this piece about a month ago, and it was one of those rare pieces that just came together. It just felt so spontaneous, and I didn't have to, wrestle it to the ground. It didn't take weeks. It didn't even take, days upon days. Took a couple of days, like all my paintings do, but it just felt so free and so fun. And I loved the way that it turned out. And so, of course, because I'm a slow learner, I showed up the next time to the canvas and I was like, oh, I want to capture that same feeling. I want to capture some of those same marks. I want to, redo some of that same stuff in my next painting. And then this painting it'll be just come together so much easier too. And I'll have some of those feelings. And of course, that in and of itself is a form of self-editing. It's attaching myself to the outcome of it before it even gets started. And y'all, I wrestled this damn painting to the ground for days. I just couldn't figure out a way to make it work. And then the more I tried to define what the other painting was and why was that, the more I went there, the more frustrated I got. And so, like I said, days upon days. So finally I stepped away and came back a few days later, and I realized the thing that made the one painting so awesome that I was missing is I was just having a good time. I was just playing. I was just going for it, right? And so I missed that sense of play and that sense of freedom in the piece that I was trying to create. Maybe you can relate to that. But as soon as I threw off all the shackles of that self-editing, what I thought it should be, that painting just started coming together, and it was so fun and exciting. And now this new painting is my new favorite painting. But sometimes play can look different than just having a good time, right? Because if we really think about play being in the essence of innovation and creativity, play can just mean showing up and going, I want to do whatever the hell I want to do today. And sometimes our days are shit. I mean, let's face it. Sometimes we are just going through some really hard times, and the idea of playing, can just irritate the hell out of you. It's like, I don't feel like playing. I'm dealing with some serious stuff here. So then we have to kind of turn the dial a little bit about what play is. And remember, when we go back to that definition, right? It's freedom, right? It's without structure. And so the play, when you're going through something difficult, can be just the idea of showing up to that canvas and doing whatever the hell you want. If all you can think is to write fuck over and over and over again, but change the colors, or fill in the areas around the F and fill in the areas around the U, whatever it might be, that is your form of play. But again, you never know what's going to come of that. I did a piece years ago. It was still one of my favorite pieces, where it was a 48 by 60. And I just went into that piece with charcoal and markers and everything. And I was just writing the most angry, potty mouth, sailor, I was saying all of the things to this person who shall not be named, my ex-husband. I was saying all of those things that I wanted to say but didn't, because I'm a nice person, right? We're nice. But I was not nice on that canvas. I put it all out there. And then kind of like after I was done with it, I was like, I like felt all of this relief. It's like I just went through a therapy session, but it was with myself. So I was just kind of a little bit physically exhausted, emotionally exhausted. I just put it all out there. And then once I did that, then I just like kept going. And a lot of that got covered up. A few of those words stayed, but they're hard to discern. So nobody wants to really buy an angry painting. Keep that in mind. There had to be a little doctoring. Well, maybe some people want to buy an angry painting, but I didn't want to sell this deeply personal, rant. Fuck you rant. That was not the intention, right? But my point is that I didn't self-edit. I showed up in a way that I was just fully able to have super amount of freedom and just play. So another way that and this speaks to what I just talked about with anger. Another way that this can be conveyed or translated into our art, it's just like having that sense of rebelliousness that maybe we have taught that we have needed to contain for a really long time. So in the, talking about my previous painting, I was talking about anger, but there was this piece that I saw in Santa Fe years ago that I still remember to this day. And you guys, I'm talking about, this is probably a decade ago. And I've looked at a lot of art between now and then. And this piece was hanging in this gallery, and it was kind of it was a cartoonish type of drawing of a young woman, and she was wearing a tutu, and there was a message written on the painting, and some sassy words, right? One of them started with a P and ended with a Y, and it was like very sexually suggestive, but super funny. Like it made you just howl with laughter. It was so funny. And sometimes we don't feel like we can show up that way in our lives, but that doesn't mean we can't be a little rebellious and put it on the canvas too. So allow your creative practice to be that time where you just get to be fully free and fully yourself, and allow your play to come through. And I'm about to tell you like specifically how to do that. But before I do that, I want to talk about something else, and the other super, super powerful thing about play. And that is that when we decide to show it to play, it takes away one of our biggest, not only creative blocks, but selling blocks. And that is when we show up to play, it takes away pressure. Okay. Now pressure can be just the nail in the coffin to creativity. And what I mean by pressure is when we show up and we're like, oh my God, I have to create a great painting because, I've got this show coming up, or if I'm going to show up to paint, I only have a few hours. So I bet this better be good. Right. So whenever we feel like there's pressure to create a masterpiece, like it just goes sideways for me every single time. So when we show up instead with a sense of, oh, you know what, I'm just gonna have a really good time here. This is just going to be a sense of play and a little bit of adventure. Then those paintings come out so much better. So play takes away the pressure, right, to create the masterpiece. The other way it removes pressure, and this is just so important, is that sometimes when we show up, we come to it with the pressure of, is this going to be marketable? Is this something that's going to sell? Will a designer look at this and want to buy it, right? That's the pressure of marketability. And we will never, ever make our freest, best, most important, most powerful work when we are coming at it from a sense of pressure for the marketplace. Instead, we make our best work when we come at it from a sense of play and freedom. And thirdly, like the pressure piece, when we show up and play, we're just kind of like it is what it is. It's we don't know what it's really about, right? The pressure of having it to mean something, that's gonna like halt our creativity in its tracks. We can decide later what it means. We can decide later what it's about. And I spend a lot of time like sitting back, looking at a painting and going, what was that about? What is this? Right. I'm like kind of having a conversation with the painting after it's done. But if I show up with the pressure of having to know what it's about, or especially, I don't know if you have ever done this, but like I'm creating a collection. So this piece has to be about, oh my God, it's like, it's a death trap for creativity. So show up to play and it's going to remove all of that pressure. All right. Now, before I talk about how to play in your work, one more thing I want to talk about. And that is, so many artists say, Jody, how do I find my style? Or how do I find, my signature? How do I, all of that? And this is how we do it. We find our signature style by playing, right? So it's just like, when you are playing, you're not thinking, right? You're just letting your imagination go wild. So that means if you feel like grabbing a marker and just kind of digging into it, or if you just feel like taking a paintbrush and making dots, or maybe you feel like dipping your hands in the paint and you're, just getting all into it and finger painting on the canvas. When you just lean into how it's going to feel and what it's going to feel like, because you're just playing, that is when you're going to find your signature style, not when we're trying to like emulate another artist's work, or like I said, emulate our own work, right? You're going to find your style by showing up time after time after time with a commitment just to the process, just to a playful process of creativity. All right, now let's talk about how we can actually do this. The first thing to do is to maybe think about what tools you can use that are a little unique, right? You can always tell art that is, that's got the paintbrush. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, we can see those brush marks and everything, and there's like so many really cool ones. But like one of the tools that I love to use is literally a paper towel. So like dipping, I usually kind of let the roll, get smaller, right? But I dip that into the paint and I'll use that. I know other artists that, love to paint with a fork, because the fork makes certain lines. Other artists, they like to just literally paint with a stick. I mean, there's so many different things you can use. So when you're thinking about how can I make this more fun? How can I make this more playful? Consider, what tools you can use that are maybe a little different. Another way I like to do this is go to the hardware store. Have you ever walked into a hardware store and especially if you look like in the paint section, you see all the brushes and you see all the trowels and you see all of these different things. I mean, even like stuff from paint to, not paint, tape and adhesives and just all these different things. So think about what kind of tools you can use that can be different. Okay, next. Stop self-editing based on what you think somebody is going to say about it. And when I say what you think somebody is going to say about it, we all know that we're talking about the people that are close to us. We don't really care what the masses or the mailman or any of those people think about our work. I mean, when we really think about it, we're only worried about like, maybe 2 or 3 people. Maybe it's our mama or a grandmama, or maybe it's our kids or our sister. What are people going to say about it who are closest to us, right? And so by thinking about that, we self-edit and we quit playing. So think about that. Like, how can I let go of my fear of judgment from the people that are closest to me? Okay, next, something that's really helped me to play more in my art, especially if I'm kind of feeling low energy when I show up to paint. Because remember, if you just wait to feel good, like wait for that inspiration to hit you to show up to paint, you're likely not going to paint very often. So you need to paint consistently. So sometimes I'll show up and it's like, this is my time to paint, but my energy's a little low. So I do the one thing that always works, and that's music. Music will always help my energy to improve and help to lift my mood. So that's a big one for me, to have more play and more freedom in my art. Next one, letting go of the expectations of what you think it's supposed to be. So letting go of the outcome early on, because if we show up and we're like, okay, I want to paint this house, and I want it to have these colors, and I want the background to be this, and that's gonna stop creativity in its tracks, right? It's gonna stop playfulness. But if you show up and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna draw out this landscape, or I'm just gonna draw this house, I'm just gonna draw this, and let's just see what happens, right? Imagine the playfulness, imagine the opportunities for innovation and creativity that's going to show up because you decided to do that one thing, just to let go of your expectations. Okay, finally, the thing that you can do to enjoy more fun and enjoy more creativity and play is stop with the comparisons, right? So stop comparing your art, what you're creating, with other people's art. And like I said, even your own art. Y'all, I know this can be so hard. I just said I've been doing this 21 years. And a month ago, I did this very thing. So sometimes it's helpful just to write all this stuff down. And if you're stuck, put it in your studio, and you can write all, like, how do I have more fun? What do you think is stopping me? Like all of that. Am I self-editing? Do I care what about my mama thinks? Like all of that, write this down. And then just remember, oh my gosh, I'm comparing my art to the last painting that I did, or I'm comparing my art to other people's art. Let go of that, and you will have more fun and more play in your creative practice. Okay, wait, I said that was the last one, but there's one more. Okay, you ready? And that is, if you want to have more play and more fun and more creativity in your life, you got to prioritize it. So the way I do this is I just straight up look at my schedule. You know how do you ever look at your week ahead and you think, okay, what are going to be my days that I exercise? Like I'm usually like a 5 days a week kind of girly for exercise. So I look at my schedule. I'm like, okay, I'm going to prioritize it for these days and these days. In the same way, I do this for play. I prioritize play. I look at I should probably prioritize pray too. but I for sure prioritize play. All right. So I look and I'm like, okay, where can I insert some fun here? Just like I was talking about, getting that windsock costume, like, oh, I can play there. Look at your calendar and just think, okay, if I'm going to be cooking dinner for my family, how can I make this a little more fun? Really look at your schedule, because, if you don't write it down, it's likely not going to happen. And just remember, you guys, this is like a muscle, okay? Playing and freedom, all of that, it's like a muscle. So the more you prioritize play in your life, the more you're going to prioritize play in your creative practice. And I just want to remind you that authenticity is at the top of our energetic scale. Okay, so like anger and depression is energetically is at the bottom, right? But authenticity and joy and love is at the top. So it is no small thing to take time in our lives to prioritize play, not only in our creative practice, but also in our lives. Okay, you guys, thanks so much for listening. If you have any questions, be sure and leave them in the comments if you're watching YouTube, or you can always click the link in the show notes and send it to us that way. And as always, if you like what you hear, then give us a 5-star review, and that really helps us to get the podcast out to other people. All right, until next time, take good care of yourselves and each other. Peace out. Every artist has their favorite tools that help them create their signature style, and I'm no different. From specific brushes to odd things not necessarily considered as an art supply, I'm sharing them all with you. You can find the PDF of my top 10 favorite studio tools at the link in the show notes.